Hi, Tesha.
Hi, Jen. How's it going?
Oh, it's okay. How are you? You were saying you had a disaster today.
I mean, mini disaster, but
like disaster is,
you know,
relative.
My oldest daughter is like, she really takes care of her things. She doesn't like keep everything. She's very reasonable about, getting rid of toys she doesn't play with anymore. But the things that she has
Are very important to her.
and they're important and they're meaningful. And apparently, she also has a journal. So she had a journal, and my youngest was pretending that she was going to take her journal and read it. And so there was like a little bit of like a tug of war thing happening with the journal, which
That's like out of a movie.
Yeah.
Did it rip?
No.
Okay.
It actually resulted in them knocking over a snow globe, which smashed to pieces. And I'm telling you, I have underestimated how much water is in a snow globe.
There's a lot.
There's a lot. And when it smashed on her desk, and all the glass fell in this little bin of stuffed animals she has beside the desk.
Man.
So now there's just like glass and little pieces of snow and wet everything. And the reaction from my oldest, like, honestly, I thought somebody was severely injured, because it was just like scream, bawling her eyes out. I'm like, what is going on? And then the youngest is crying because it was an accident, and she thinks she's in trouble, and she didn't mean for that to happen. But it was just like a whole thing. I am telling you, it took me probably 40 minutes to clean up all of the mess, which really, in the grand scheme of things, I know that this isn't like the be all and end all, but it was not how I was planning to spend my evening. That was not on the agenda.
That sounds like a nightmare.
And like, there's still a whole bunch of stuffies in my dryer right now because it was just filled with the snow and potentially pieces of glass. So I'm like, it's all going in
danger. Yeah.
And then, it just situations today.
Well, we did our monthly family trip to the chiropractor.
Yes.
And which we all love. We love our chiropractor. And we always work it out that we all go together so that mommy gets extra time. She adjusts them more quickly. And what we have learned, because Wyatt has been seeing the chiropractor since he was born, like 8 weeks old. Logan started probably 3 years ago going. And we're in the room, and they're really comfortable with her. We're in the room, and there was like, it looked like a heating lamp, or like, I don't know. There was a lamp rolled over to the side, and Logan went first, and they fought about who got to go first. And he's like, "What's that?" And she's like, "Oh, it's a heating lamp, because, it helps with adjustments sometimes. It just gets nice and warm and whatever." She goes, "Do you want it?" And he was like, "Yeah." And meanwhile, Wyatt's sitting there with his legs crossed playing on my phone. And she's looking at me like, what is going on? Like, they were just so like grown up all of a sudden, and like, bring on all the self-care. And Wyatt lays down, and she's used like a Theragun on me before. And so it's one of those like poundy things like that works out your muscles. And Wyatt was like, "I want that." And she's like, "So your boys are really into their treatments."
They're about it today.
Well, they always are. Like, Wyatt lays there with his hands behind his head and his feet crossed. He used to, when he was an infant and started getting treated by her, he would fall asleep every time. She was his first client to ever fall asleep while being treated.
He loves it.
He loves it. They're so like into it. It's pretty hysterical. But yeah, and so that was our day. And then I came home to a dog pooped on a rug, and we were just recording an episode, and Wyatt woke up because he was constipated. So that was super fun to deal with. This is what it's like to record with us. I have to keep like leaving to go deal with them.
Yeah, definitely laughed a lot during that episode, which is not the one that our listeners are about to hear. But
one thing about that is I am going to take all the bits that I cut out with me complaining about this issue and make a little behind the scenes reel for the for our Patreon community. So that in addition with Tisha's episode that's up there already and the couple of other things we have there are definitely worth subscribing for.
Yes, absolutely, Jen. You're so right. And that'll be fun. That'll be a fun little mini episode.
Yeah, it'll be short, but it'll be like a little fun behind the scenes of what it's actually like to record with us.
Yes. I will say though that this episode that we're releasing this week was a lot of fun to record as well.
Oh yeah. This whole constipation conversation would have fit in with it really well. Cause I feel like with Lisa, like no holds barred, all bets are off of what you're going to talk about.
Yeah. So enjoy the show.
Yeah. And subscribe to our Patreon, buy us a copy, rate, review, share with a friend. Every little thing that you do to share the show helps us, and it helps us make a greater impact, which is what we're here for. Hi, and welcome back to Now What? I'm Jen.
And I'm Tesha. Thank you so much for listening again. We are joined today by Lisa Hicks, who is a life coach and just all around wonderful person. Welcome, Lisa.
Welcome.
Thank you.
Fun fact, I feel like I don't know how I found Lisa on Instagram or she found me, but we found each other on Instagram and actually I think met in person in real life, like during COVID.
It was just before we met at one of Carrie's events.
No, we did.
Yeah.
We met. Yeah, we did.
Yeah.
But I'm thinking specifically about that time that we were both at the same Mexican restaurant.
The best.
That's her.
So good. Yeah, that was like August 2020. That was when we all thought that like things were going to clear up soon and that we would be going back to normal. All those days.
Yeah, I remember.
And
that
we're still on Zoom, not just for recording the podcast.
Fuck, what a time.
Yeah. So crazy. So sorry, I cut you off, Tesha. You were talking.
I don't know. We love Lisa.
We're Lisa fans. She's a life coach. We recommend you follow her on Instagram, and that will be in the show notes because she's a lot of fun, and we're gonna have fun talking to her today.
Excited.
Yeah.
So we kind of chatted about a couple topics, and I think one of them that stood out, I know to me personally, was kind of your journey with ADHD.
I sent the email of, how to prepare for the show. I was more making notes on like how to rein myself in forever about this topic. So as I was saying to you guys before, I was diagnosed when I was 18. So I went my whole life, my mom was like, you have learning disabilities. I'm like, no, I don't. What are you talking about? And then I could get it through school enough to survive and pass and move forward.
But was it a struggle?
Oh, absolutely. And like, there were certain things, like I love music, performance, dramatic arts, very much so. I excelled in, but things like math, science, like those were really English. So basically every other subject was very challenging for me. Eventually, and I don't even know how it all worked out, but I got tested. And so the main diagnosis that came out were anxiety, depression. They had two different diagnoses, so ADHD and ADD. Now it's just the one term. Okay, cool. But nobody explained to me what that meant. Nobody shed any light on that topic. And I was just like, cool. And I went about my merry way, went away to
here's your diagnosis, go on your way. We're not going to give you any tools or strategies, just like see you later.
It's wild
and there was no talk of like even like medication or therapy or anything, like because you had anxiety and depression was in there as well, which are comorbidities with ADHD.
Very much so. And that's like such an interesting thing too, is it's like when I'm working with people and specifically those with ADHD, we're like pulling apart, like, okay, is the anxiety because of like anxiety, or is it because of like all of the masking you've had to do all of your life with ADHD and like you've learned all of these coping mechanisms, which for me, that's I think a big piece of it. Like, it's funny because my mom has ADHD as well. It's a very genetic disorder. if a child is diagnosed with ADHD, one of the parents is also ADHD or neurodivergent in some capacity.
In some way.
It's very much a spectrum.
It's really interesting. I didn't know that.
So so I went away to university, started doing some therapy in there, but more for anxiety, went on anxiety meds. And then, just did the things you were supposed to do. I got a job, I got married, and then I had kids and all of those pieces. And interesting now that I know more about ADHD, looking at my life and just like, I spent my whole life feeling like an outsider. I often explain it as like, I'm an alien in a human's body, observing those around me, trying to figure out how to human. Like, I don't know how to human. And so it was, a very common thing in ADHD. First of all, jumping all over the place. Hi. And is mirroring. And so like, there's just so many pieces that like, I never felt like I fit in. I always felt that I was trying really hard, but like nothing really worked. I was always working against myself. And so that's a big thing in neurodivergence is masking, right? Is like, be and do what we think others want us to pretend to do and be and act and all of those pieces. And then I had kids and I couldn't do it anymore because I was fucking exhausted. Like, it's a mess. Yeah. It's a mess. Mm-hmm. Like,
all your energy was going to that. You have nothing left to mask anymore.
Like then I struggled with postpartum depression after my first, and like, so there was all of these moving pieces. And then kind of flash forward to last year, so 2021, I built a business. I'm a life coach, and I was doing research or watching TikToks. TikTok played a big part in all of this, but I somehow landed on ADHD TikTok, and my mind was absolutely blown. Like literally, I was watching videos crying because I was like, holy shit, this explains so much about me. And it was such a pivotal moment in my life because it was the first time I ever felt seen, like truly, truly seen. And not just by the world, but by myself, right? Like it's one thing to be seen by other people, but it was like, you're not stupid, you're not lazy, you're not crazy, you're not any of these stories that I had come up myself. I was like, this is your fucking brain. It just can't. Like there's just certain things that it can't, or it has a hard time doing, or blah, 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 whatever it was. And so kind of understanding what it meant and what it looked like.
So when you kind of had that moment, did you seek out supports or?
Actually, around that time, I had met a friend on Instagram and we started following each other. She's a therapist, and ADHD, like she's on the more like the hyperactive side of it, whereas I'm more the inattentive deficit side. That's more me. Conversations about because she had done a ton of research. She's on medication. She's been to therapy for it. And so her and I would talk about it, and it would, again, like it would just constantly blow my mind. And I'm like, okay. And then it was this really cool thing where like we both saw each other and we were both like, oh my God. And we had this common place, like safe place, I guess, to talk about it. Mm-hmm. And then I started sharing, and I started on my Instagram, and like the number of messages that I would get that are like, wait, that's ADHD, or like, wait, what? Wait, that's not normal. Wait, what? And I was like, I know. And then all of a sudden I have this all of these people in my inbox being like, so after I saw your post, I went and I got a diagnosis, and it turns out I'm ADHD. And these are people who are like 35, 40, 45, 50, mostly women. Oh man, there are so many of us out there.
Mm-hmm. Full disclosure, like seeing some of your posts, I've been talking to my doctor, and I'm like waiting to talk to somebody about it, because like starting from you, and then I don't know if he's bigger on TikTok, Wayne Hanna, Good Morning Assholes.
I don't think so.
He's in Peterborough.
Oh my God, that sounds like an account I need to follow though.
He's really funny. He has ADHD. He was diagnosed as a kid, but he went off medication because he served in the military and he couldn't serve in the military on meds. And he hadn't been on them since like last year. I think he went back on them. And it like was a huge change for him. And so between him talking about it and then seeing your posts, and then I was like, I don't know, I feel like that's resonating with me. And I feel like I need to do something about that and see at least. But yeah, like it does. I feel like it has an impact when somebody is sharing so vulnerably about something like that, that you identify with.
It's often something that we think of, I think, or that we associate with children.
And specifically boys.
That's the other thing I was going to say. Like when you're saying all these women, I was like, oh, that's so interesting.
Well, girls, I think, are underdiagnosed even
massively
still.
Underdiagnosed.
But I'm sure it wasn't even considered when any of us were young.
Honestly, like the really interesting thing is, so I've done a ton of, I hyperfocus. That's another ADHD trait. And so when we find something that's really interesting, we're like in it and nothing can stop us from learning about it. And so ADHD became my hyperfocus. And through the courses and readings that I did, first of all, the majority of ADHD research up until recently was done on white 5-year-old boys. So that's like such a specific part of the population.
Yes.
And and then I think too, when you think of ADHD, you think of a hyper boy bouncing around the class, not paying attention, can't focus, right? Whereas with women and girls, again, just generally speaking, we're more like the overachievers, we're the overperformers, we're the teacher's pet, we're those things, because it's like we have this compensation thing and this need for validation. That's a very ADHD trait. And so when you look at a girl who's excelling in school and getting amazing marks, you're like, great, she's doing fine, like no problem there. And then she gets to, adulthood. There's so many burnt out ADHDers because like you just get to a point where you're like, I don't fucking care anymore. I can't do this. Like whether it's through kids, whether it's through a pandemic, like I think a lot of people too are, the pandemic I think has stripped so many of us of past stories, past all of these pieces. And now we're just, sounds very bleak, but I feel like a lot of us are kind of just like shells of humans right now, just like getting through this.
Well, you're like locked in your house with whoever you like came out of you and who you did it with, if you're lucky enough to have that person. And like,
or you're single, like even for single folks, right? Who were like alone, like Zoom calls only go so far. And, it's, I think just no matter what stage of life you're in, everybody, I think, took that step back and was like, hey, what the fuck am I doing? Like, what's the plan here? Right. Like, and just time to slow down and actually notice things about ourselves, like about our partners, about our kids, about anything. And it's been like, okay.
Well, so many of our distractions were removed.
Exactly.
Right. And all of a sudden you're like trapped in a house with yourself and your family, but a lot more time to like, I think, to self-reflect and
big time
notice those things.
Big time.
And I have heard it said about other like neurodivergent people, and I'm thinking about like autism and Asperger's specifically, that they say those girls tend to be a little bit better at that masking you were talking about, and a little bit higher in that social monitoring. So they they use their intelligence to figure out how to fit in, although they're not really feeling like they fit in.
Yes, they're really good at pretending.
They're good at pretending. Exactly. So that's interesting. Do you think that was like a factor in you not getting diagnosed earlier?
Oh, 1,000%. And, this is kind of one of those pieces too, where it's like, is it the ADHD or is it the childhood trauma? But it's like, I, from a very young age, have been a people pleaser. Like, as far as I can remember, like I remember when my sister was born, I was 5.5. And like, I remember carrying her down the stairs and like just being so not even proud of myself, but like my parents were like, oh my God, that's amazing. And like just that need for attention. Like I've always had that. And so I think that fueled, like I would always do enough to to get like 70s, you know, or B's. And that was fine. And I'd be told that if you applied yourself, you know, you'd be smart or you'd do better, blah, blah, blah. Cool. But then like, it was enough to get acknowledgement and praise and all of those pieces. And then through all of this, we actually moved 4 times. So I was in 4 different schools in 4 years or something like that. And so I think that actually just like strengthened my ability to mask and just fit in because I had to, like it was survival, right? And so that skill that was an ADHD skill then became a survival skill. And then it just happens. Like it just, even now to this day, despite all of my work, I find myself very much matching people's energy just subconsciously without even thinking about it, or just like saying something that I think they want to hear, because that like people pleasing and that like desire just sticks. It's just easy.
I'm a bit of a people pleaser too.
Yeah. It's hard. It's fucking hard, man. Like recovery your whole life. Like I don't know if it ever goes away. You know, like I think it gets a lot better and a lot easier, and, you know, boundaries become easier. And as you practice it, like, it's like a muscle, but it's still there. Like it's still, you know, it takes that conscious effort. And again, we're fucking tired. So sometimes that effort's not there, and that's okay. That's totally okay. But people pleasing it's hard. It's a hard one.
So what are some of the things, I hope I'm not digging, I don't know too much,
Please.
But like, what are some of the things that I guess you were seeing on TikTok that you were like, oh, that's me? Like, what are some of the things that you do or that you notice about kind of your life that, I don't know.
So
yeah,
so many things. I think it's very important to also like, and this is something I've been aware of, to note that some of the traits of ADHD, you know, neurotypical people have, right? Like there are moments of forgetfulness, or there's moments of getting distracted, or there's moments of whatever. And the main thing with the ADHD is that it's been present for at least, I think it's like the last 6 months, and that it impacts your daily life. So it's not just because you're tired, it's because, you know, you don't have dopamine in your brain, and that's just how your brain works. So a lot of what I noticed actually came from when I was working in a corporate job. So I worked in the corporate world for 10 plus years, and I was, so the not being able to apply myself, the being very scattered, like no matter how many fucking Post-it notes I had, no matter how many flags in my inbox, no matter how many reminders I set, I was always forgetting something. I was always like not able to live up to where everybody else was at. The masking, that was a big one for me, to even have the language to describe what it was that I was doing, and almost like, you know, putting it on and morphing into who I thought people wanted me to be, and the mental space that took up, and the distractedness, like, you know, the very stereotypical one of distracted, but it's not just like, oh, something shiny. It's like, like the perfect example is just like, you come in from the door, you come into the house, you put your keys down, you have to go pee, go into the bathroom, you notice that your mirror's dirty, so you start to clean that, and then you realize that you're out of toilet paper, so you go up the stairs, and you're like, oh fuck, I gotta put that on my grocery list, and then go downstairs to the grocery, you know, like it's all of these series of events that like, and then you don't even remember what it was that you were starting to do at the beginning of all of that, or, you know, you've left I left a toothbrush in my closet in my office the other day because I forgot about something that I had to do. And last night I had nothing to brush my teeth with because I didn't know where the fuck I put my toothbrush. And so there's that like very much absent-mindedness, I think is like the cute term that is used, but it's very debilitating. Like it's very debilitating when you can't trust your brain. And you know, memory is a big challenge. I struggled with that in my corporate job a lot. My boss would be like, we talked about this. And I'm like, I have no memory of any of that, and feeling this like sense of shame. And so learning that was like those are just like some off the top of my head. There's so many.
Yeah, no, it's great.
But it's you know, it's like a quirky thing, but then it's also like really fucking debilitating. Oh, and the burnout. I think that was the biggest one that like I really resonated with at the time, was like the neurodivergent burnout, where you literally can't, no matter what you want to do. And often that is, I think, misdiagnosed with depression, because they look very similar, because you like.
Well, yeah, it's like there's also like, I think actually we referenced Jess earlier, but she is this woman that we had on the podcast is ADHD, and she was talking about like the time suck, or like the time, like where you like lose complete track of time.
Yes. And it can be hours. It can be, you know, I have a client of mine who said that he lost 3 days and just like didn't eat, didn't sleep, because like he was researching something and was just like, and that happens. Like it literally almost happened before I came on with you guys today. I was like, oh, I have 5 minutes. I'm just going to jump onto TikTok. And I look up and it's, you know, 8:31. And I was like,
TikTok kind of does that though to everyone.
To be fair, you're right.
To be fair, it's TikTok. It wasn't something else. Like,
but it could easily be. And it's just like anything that like dopamine. So dopamine is the big chemical for ADHDers, dopamine and serotonin. And so if it gives you that dopamine hit, you're going to fucking do it. Like, so that's another one, the impulse shopping. Like I'm very much an impulse shopper. I love spending money, but I have a lot of money shame. And so it's like this really fun game that I play with myself. But like, if I see something and there's that like shop now button or like buy now, it's happening. If I wait 5 minutes, I usually get over it. But like that
it's hard to wait that 5 minutes.
And you're like, I need it. I need this planter. It has boobs on it. I love that. That's what I want. You need that, Lisa. No, you kill all of your plants. What are you doing? I'm like, nope, I'm going to be hyper focused on gardening. Like the hyper focus piece was so interesting to me as well. Like
hyper focus. I don't know that I have ADHD.
I don't think you do.
I definitely hyper focus.
Yes.
To like the marvel of people who know me well, who are just like, whoa, like,
right?
You're really into this topic right now. You had just spent, like, my husband's like, you just spent 5 hours researching strollers. I'm like, yeah, I know.
Into the strollers, but that's neurodivergent or not, that gives you that dopamine hit, right? Like it makes you feel good, and or you're interested in it, or you're engaged in it.
Yeah. Like, I mean, I think the strollers is like an anxiety piece as well. Cause like, I really want to know that I'm making the very best decision. So I have to compare everything to like make sure.
I'm like that with our budget. I like really get into our budget and then ignore it completely. But like when I'm because of the anxiety, right? Like same thing. I'm like, okay, we're gonna have enough money. This is where we're putting this. This is what we're doing with this, putting this on the credit card, blah, 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 blah. And then I ignore it. But like,
I think something that we should like note and say is that if you are someone who's like identifying with what Lisa is saying, or you head to TikTok during this or to her feed, you need to talk to your doctor. Yes. Like don't self-diagnose
loosely. And like, I cannot
like, that's what I did. Like I was in a place where I was like, this might be me. And what I did was call my doctor. And just to be clear, none of us have any business.
No. And I make that abundantly clear.
Helping you figure out what you are.
Yes. Thank you for that disclaimer. And same thing with the like relatability, right? Because there are a lot of traits, like the hyperfocus for you is more of an anxiety piece versus the ADHD piece, right? Like there is a lot of overlap between all of them. Like this is just my opinion. I have zero scientific backing, but based on my experiences, mental health is very much a spectrum, right? And like, it's all very interrelated. It all very much plays off of each other. And, and then I think too, like symptoms can change based on your life experiences and based on, where you are in your life. Like I was telling you before, like everything really changed when I became a mom. Like a lot of symptoms came to the surface after that.
Well, and I think there's something to be said, like we've talked here before, and it's something Tesha and I've talked about a lot, about how becoming a mom is like really transformative. And there's often, we both believe that you experience trauma when you give birth.
Massively so.
Whether it's as in your face as our one guest, Kaylee, who, was unconscious when her son was born, but like it's traumatic. Birth is a traumatic thing. And then to like deal with postpartum depression, or even if you don't, like there's that trauma that you have to kind of live with and come back from, right? And so it just always calls things into question in some way, and like forces you to kind of, I mean, when you're a mom with babies, it's like kind of hard too. But as somebody who is still dealing with the trauma, my trauma from 2.5 years ago, it just everyone kind of, as an adult anyway, it kind of forces this shift. So it kind of started for you when you became a mom, and then, but then it was like last year, year and a half ago, when you were like, oh, wait a minute. Wow. Yeah. That's me. So you don't have to answer this, but I probably think you will. Are you on medication?
No. So the interesting thing, even though I have a diagnosis, I don't have the paperwork because I don't keep track of paperwork. And
because you have ADHD.
Because I have ADHD.
I mean, also you were 18 when that paperwork was done, but
right.
I mean, it would be miraculous.
Like I literally either hold on to everything or nothing. Like there's no in between, and it depends on where I am in my, cleaning cycle. So I am medicated for anxiety. So I do take Zoloft, and I have been on that since I had postpartum depression with Oliver. So that was 5-ish years ago. And then in the last year, I actually doubled my dose and then doubled it again. So in the conversation with my doctor, he was like, try with the anxiety meds that you're on right now, because you, according to him, don't quote me, but you need the diagnosis to go on the ADHD medication. So he was like, try this, see how it goes, and then we can kind of go from there. And for me, it made all of the difference. Like just I still have ADHD symptoms in my everyday life, but I'm learning how to live with them and work with them. But I can only do that because I came out of, like, I was in a really big depression last year. Like there's just no other way to say it. And so the meds helped me to like clear that fog, to then like put practices into place to help me live my life in a way that felt better, because it was way too, like, it was just, everything was hard last year. And I mean, I know it's not exclusive to me. Like, I think everybody was really feeling that and continues to. So I am on meds, but not ADHD meds. Yes. Long story short.
That's okay. So, I mean, you've really, I think, started to like identify with that diagnosis, but did you ever consider that like part of your identity? Like when you were diagnosed at 18, like would you tell people that you had ADHD, or did you ever think about it?
A great question. I think it was more of a like party trick, that it was like, oh, I have ADHD, that I'm so cute and random. Like, I think it was more about that versus understanding the actual impacts that it had on my life.
Yes.
Right.
Okay.
And so as a teen, and this is a very common thing with ADHDers, is I've had a lot of speeding tickets, like a lot of them. Like in 1 year I had like 4, and that was my, like, ADHDers are notoriously reckless in a lot of ways, not all of them, but that was like, that's a common thing, because dopamine. And like there was, university was a massive struggle for me, like a massive struggle. Somehow I managed to graduate. I still have no idea how, probably the masking, and the ability to like hold on to information just long enough to regurgitate it onto a piece of paper and then, move on. But like drinking was a big part of my university. Like those were things that I didn't realize I relied on so heavily because of ADHD. And it was, I think it was kind of a way to like self-medicate, I guess you could say, because I didn't understand it. I had no understanding of what it even meant. And so now it's very much, I don't want to say like a part of my identity, but it's definitely a massive part of who I am and how I operate on a day-to-day. Like educating my husband was a huge piece of that. And I'm 99% sure that my oldest has it too. And so like educating my husband to be like, okay, when Oliver or I act like this is what's happening. It's not because I'm ignoring you. That's a big thing for him. Like, I can be on my phone and he can be like literally yelling in my ear and I do not hear him. He does not exist to me. And it's the same with my oldest. And I know part of that's just being a kid, but you know, being like, I'm not ignoring you. You don't exist because I'm so focused on whatever fucking stupid TikTok I'm watching, and like, and helping him to understand what it meant in the process of educating myself. And, you know, I'm not lazy. I just literally can't bring myself to tidy up around the house, or, you know, it's not that my husband owns his own business too, and I help him on it. And it's like, it's not that I don't care about your business. It's that like, I just literally, I can't today. Like I'm done. I'm done. Mm-hmm. And it's not because I don't care. It's because there's not a single fiber in my body that can do anything right now except for sit. But then I also was running my business. And so I had to reserve all of my energy for my clients. And that's it. That's all I had. Like that was the extent of it. So that's where, for me, the meds have really come into play, because now I have energy for my clients and for my family, which is important.
What are some of the other things? So to me, this is what I'm hearing so far. Yes. Like in terms of your strategies for coping is like, I think obviously medication.
Yep.
But I think that piece you're talking about, like teaching your husband what it is, so that you're kind of helping build that support system for yourself. When the people who love you understand what's going on, right, then they're in a better place to support you.
Yes.
Are there other things that you've done as well, like other strategies that you have?
Definitely. I think the overtime, and it's kind of, you know, the interesting thing and what I wrestle with is, I don't want to change my brain. That's not my goal. Like, I don't want to change it to fit into the way the world expects it to, because I've done that my whole life over that.
Yeah.
However, we still live in a predominantly neurotypical world. And so there are certain expectations that I do have to, you know, like, I have to, you know, put my kids in different clothes every day to go to school, or, you know, whatever it, like, there's certain that like I couldn't give two shits about. I don't care if they bath for 4 weeks, but that's something that is important and they need to. And, you know, obviously if they're disgusting, I will have to give them a bath. But like showering is another example. Like, I fucking hate showering. It's a very sensory experience that I do not enjoy. Like the thought of like, just like, it just gross. It's so gross. Everything about it.
Really?
I hate it. I hate showers.
Okay.
Because when I get out of the shower, then I have to put on a towel, and then there's like dry material touching wet skin, and it's just like, I want to crawl into a hole. I hate it. I hate the whole process. And sensory issues, that's another big one.
So don't put on a towel.
But then I'm cold, and then I'm grumpy about being cold.
Okay.
No, it's like a no-win situation. But I appreciate it's just like,
I'm like, you're in your own house. Technically, you don't have to put on a towel. You make the rules. You're the grown-up.
It's true. But then like dry clothes on a wet, oh God. Like when people put on jeans.
Well, I mean, I wish that the audience could see how you're like stiffening your body as you're explaining.
I know, she's just like sticking her tongue out like she's going to vomit.
That is literally the experience. When I even just seeing people do it, you know, like in movies when like people get out of the pool and then they put on a pair of jeans, I just wanted like, no, it's awful. No. So certain things I do have to do, right? Like there's just certain things that we have to do. But what I've really been trying to focus on is like, okay, what is important to me? So, you know, for example, I'm terrible with birthdays. And even my sons, I have to like really think about it, because the numbers in my kids' birthdays are kind of similar. And that's another big piece that I struggle with is in friendships. Like some people really care about their birthdays. I'm not one of them, but some people do. And I like to honor that for those people that it matters to, but it's very hard for me to remember birthdays. And so I have like 16 different reminders set up. It's in my calendar in the kitchen. Like at the beginning of the year, I'll go through and I'll write everybody's birthday in the calendar. So it's there. It's in my phone. When I find out somebody's birthday, I set a reminder for every year. Like, so I have like,
you don't just go on Facebook and like wait for it to tell you
because some people don't put when their birthday is on Facebook, and then I'm like, Trust me, I've tried.
Yeah.
There's some people I'm like, fuck, I can't remember their birthday. They're a really good friend of mine.
If they care that much, it
It's
should be on
true.
Facebook.
It's
Let's be
true.
clear. Because you don't have to put the year. You don't have to put the year.
True. Because I feel
without
like
Facebook, I would know when nobody's birthday is.
same.
I know yours. I will always know yours, Tisha.
Okay.
Because yours is easy.
My birthday is on Halloween.
Oh, okay. So
there's
that one.
It's memorable. Right?
Yes. 100%. And like, honestly, the only reason why I remember even my husband's birthdays is because it's a day after my sister's and they're exactly 10 years apart. So like, even for him, like, and I'm, if I'm filling out forms or whatever, I have to like think about it for a second.
Backdate it or whatever.
Yeah. So a lot of what I do is, thank God for smartphones, is I set reminders the moment something comes up. And so if you see if I have it even now, not that the audience can see, but I have, oh yeah, there you go. I have like all the alarms set up for myself to remember, and like literally everything, like go pick up your children, or like, groceries. I ordered groceries for Friday. I had to put that in there because I will forget. There's just, so the reminders has been a really big thing for me, is putting and having multiple reminders, which sounds chaotic and a lot of work, and it is. And that's often why I forget it. And then I don't do it. And then I forget things. And then we start the cycle all over again. It's exhausting, but that's like the reminders help. And so I just keep reminding myself, like, in the moment, you're not, because I always trick myself to be like, no, I'll remember. It's a lie. I never will. I will not remember. Unless it's like something super interesting. Like today I hyperfixated on this date because I did not want to miss it because I was so excited. Yay! But like, if it's, something monotonous, like picking up groceries, I'm going to forget. Right.
Yeah.
They're calling me and being like, where are you? I'm like, I'm on my way.
Groceries, yeah.
And then ADHDers are notorious for having like multiple notebooks that we never fill out, planners that we never use. So I stopped using a planner because I never used it. I would use it for like a week and then forget about it. So primarily my phone is just like setting reminders on my phone, having the one calendar, and then routine has been like, we hate routine, but we thrive in routine. So starting really small with, like, for me right now, I really am focusing on my water intake. That's just really important to me because I was getting migraines and all of these things that I wasn't getting before. So I have one big water bottle, and my routine is at night, I fill it up, put it in the fridge. In the morning, the first thing I do is I take it and it has like the markers of like where you're supposed to track it through the day. So that like makes my brain all happy. And like that, so now that's a routine, and now I don't have to think about it, which is great. And it just happens. So the other key piece is like finding the things that are important to you and finding ways to work it into a routine that you're already doing. Like, and I think that's just habits in general, but it's especially important for ADHDers. Like, it's so crucial that we have that routine.
I hate it.
I know, me too. I thrive in chaos too. Like that.
And I thrive on routine. Like, thrive on a schedule, thrive on routine.
I'm not saying that I don't. I just don't like it.
I hear you.
Yeah. No, I like it.
They better call me for that appointment soon.
It's interesting as I'm talking to you, because I frequently say that, like, I'm learning to overcome just being an overwhelmed mom, and certainly have suffered from burnout and relate to a lot of the forgetfulness and like feeling like I just don't have my shit together. And one of the things that I have found, and I don't have ADHD, but one of the things I have found is like fewer things on my plate is really good.
Yes. Simple, like as simple as possible.
And like having just like a simple routine, like,
yeah, totally.
My kids have a bath on Sunday, and that's when I cut their nails, and that's when I clean their ears, and like that, and it has to be on Sunday because otherwise it might not happen regularly until all of a sudden I'm looking at their nails. I'm like, oh shit, I should probably cut those. Like,
that was us tonight.
Right? Because especially as a parent, you're not just responsible for you.
Yes.
You're responsible for these other little beings.
With no instructions. Nobody tells us what we're actually supposed to do. So we're all just winging
it. And it's not a choice.
And it's not a choice.
And you throw work in there and all those expectations. Like,
Yeah.
And a pandemic. Like, let's not forget the pandemic, man.
That is overwhelming for anybody.
Yes. Like, that is
Yes.
playing a massive role in all of our lives right now, whether or not we're like directly impacted through, you know, the vid itself. It's all of the other layers of like what we were talking about, like isolating. It's constantly worrying if your kid, every cough that comes out of my kid's mouth, I'm like, is this it? Did we get it? Like, are we doing this? Are we going into this lockdown? Are we going to have to, you know, like there's no planning ahead. Like there's no breaks. Like there's no something to look forward to because it's hard to make plans right now. Like,
yes.
Right. And
or you make the plans and then cancel, but you never know if you're going to keep them.
And so you're not even really excited, because that's like the best part, I think, about making plans and traveling and going out with friends and all of those things is like the anticipation of going to do it. Right. And we don't have that because it's like, or we're all just too fucking burnt out to go, like I make plans with friends all the time. And then we both are like, sorry, I can't. We're just not. And it's like,
I just hope the other person cancels or forgets.
Yes. Me and my friends, we just straight up don't even pretend. We're just like, we'll do a check-in and we're like, how are you doing? Do you have the capacity for this? And usually one of us doesn't. And it's like, no problem. Like, call me if you need to, but also don't call me because I don't have the capacity. So like,
I'm not talking on the phone.
I am not.
I'm not going to answer a phone call. Thank you very much.
Will not.
Do not phone me. I'm not answering.
Yes.
The times I'm alone are typically in the car, like when I'm going somewhere, on the odd time I do have a babysitter. And so I call people then, and I call Tisha, like not all the time, but I do. And you can always tell she's like, hi. And I'm like, I'm driving. I can't text you.
Like, why are you phoning me?
And I'm alone. And I thought of this, so I have to call you. I mean, I'd be the same way if someone called me.
My husband and I call answering the phone living on the edge.
It is. 1,000%. It's like if you want to dance with danger, pick up your phone when somebody calls you. That is.
Yeah. He's like, my phone is ringing. I'm like, do you feel like living on the edge?
It's amazing. I love it.
Look at me right now. I'm living on the edge. I'm going to answer it.
That's so wild.
Like, what is this person calling me for?
I feel that in my bones.
Especially if it's an unknown number or like a number you don't recognize.
I do.
Like, that's just.
I do for the most part. There are certain people, if they call, that I don't really think anything of it. But
yes.
So it was about a year ago that you had this whole, like, I like to say, come to Jesus with like your ADHD.
Yes.
And it seems like from following you on Instagram and connecting with you on the gram, you also had kind of like an identity shift going on as well.
Yes.
Probably as a result of all the self-reflection and isolating and pandemic life and all of it, I would imagine. But could you tell us more about that?
Absolutely. So being a life coach, and running a coaching business, one of my biggest things is I want to walk the walk as well as talk the talk. So I want to do the work that I'm encouraging my clients to do. Maybe not exactly the same amount of, or like the same type of work, but that's important to me. And my mom's been in therapy my whole life. Like that was very normalized for me as a kid. And so, around the time that I started my business 3 years ago, I was working with a coach and all of these things. And then the pandemic hit, and continued to do that work and strip back layers. And this was before I really identified with my ADHD. And there was a moment in my life where I was like, I'm pretty sure I'm bisexual. Like, I'm like 80% sure that I'm bisexual. And so I told my husband, we were out for lunch on like one date that we got. And he was kind of like, okay. And then we just kind of changed topics. And then I took it back and I was like, no, I'm not. I just think women are pretty. And then a few months later, it was like, no, I'm definitely bisexual. Like it was as the layers were stripped back and TikTok, I found lesbian TikTok and fell down that rabbit hole. And I was like, there's just so many things that I was like, wow, okay. So again, came out to my husband and then started to come out to friends. And my mom knows, my sister knows. I mean, at this point, if you look at my profile, like you're like, yeah, she's probably queer in some capacity. I have a pride flag, everything's rainbows. Like but it was a time, like it was very challenging for our marriage because I have little to no experience with women. Like I grew up with a Mennonite background. So gay wasn't a thing. Like it just wasn't, you just weren't. My mom like was cool with the LGBTQ community, but like it was okay for them, but like never really explained to me that it was okay for me. It was just one of those things. And so again, with the ADHD, similar to that experience, looking back on my life, and I'll still have moments now where I'm like, oh, Lisa, you're gay, babe. Like you're bisexual. Like that's, but I was too scared to even like think about that. And so, yeah. And I'm in a monogamous marriage, and my husband was like, what are we doing here? Like, what do you, and I'm like, I don't know. This is just as scary to me as it is to you. Right. Like, so it's been very much, and that I think instead of exploring that sexually, it was more like, how can I identify as that as a woman in a cis monogamous marriage? A hetero monogamous marriage, sorry. And so, I did an undercut, and I dyed my hair purple, and I just kind of bought a bunch of rainbow things, and again, started having conversation with other people in my DMs who are going through the same thing. And we're like, me too. Like that was just never something that was talked about. And now I'm realizing most of us who are in heterosexual marriages and being like, cool, so what does this mean? And to be honest, I still don't really have an answer. Like it's still something that I'm exploring and understanding, and connecting with other queer folks who are on this journey as well has been really helpful for me to just even have that feeling of like, I'm not alone. Right. Like, I think there's a lot of, especially when you grow up with religion, there's a lot of shame in being queer. Like there is. And Mennonites are very conservative. And so that's basically unheard of. And yeah, it's just, and then having conversations with my kids, and, people have two daddies, two mummies, one daddy, one mommy, like, and, it's not just boy, girl. I'm like, there's other pronouns, there's they, them, and helping them to understand it. And I'm at least in like helping them to feel safe to be whoever they are, whatever it is, like, whatever it is. And that's very important to me because my mom did the best that she could with what she had, but she was very accepting and very loving when I came out to her. It was a very positive experience, and I'm very fortunate in that. But yeah, it was
we grew up in a bit of a different generation too, where I don't think a lot of parents had that thought to talk to their children about these things.
Totally.
Well, because it was kind of like you would never want your child to be that.
Or and I totally get that. Like, it's okay for other people. Like it is not going to be okay for you to call somebody gay. It's not going to be okay for you to mistreat somebody because of their sexuality, but it's also maybe not going to be okay for you to be that. Right. Right. Like,
there was none of that in my house. Not even like there are people who like that.
Right.
Are you kidding? WASP New England family?
Totally.
I learned about that at my all-girls, very progressive high school.
That's amazing.
About what? Like
about being gay. Yeah.
Funnily enough,
I don't ever remember anybody saying gay people exist, but it was definitely not a conversation in my home.
I grew up in Toronto. I've lived in Toronto my entire life. So I think just like being in a big metropolis, there are gay people around.
Well, and your mom worked in like social services of some sort. So like very different. Yeah. But even the university I went to didn't realize this, but was very conservative. Like I remember one year, I don't even remember what the group was called that supported the LGBTQ community, but there was like Gay Jeans Day and wear jeans in support of.
I was like, what's a gay jean? I'm trying to like.
And I had friends who wore jeans every day and did not on that day.
Oh, wow.
Right.
Okay.
Very, very conservative Jesuit university. So yeah, it just was a different time. And meanwhile, I have a 9-year-old who like is definitely playing around with pronouns right now. Yeah, it was just such a different time. And I guess it feels really like, I mean, and you're still figuring it out, obviously, but like I could imagine your husband being like, so like you're leaving me for a woman? Like what's happening here?
100%. And it was like, it was a lot. Like it was really challenging. We did couples therapy and like, just navigating, because his whole thing was like, you're probably going to want to explore that. And I'm like, maybe, I don't know, not in this moment, but like, maybe I do, I don't know. And I don't like not knowing. Like that's not something that I deal well with. Yeah. I mean, I'm sure that's for a lot of people, but
well, especially in something like that, like when there's this thing about like once you're married, like you're with your person, you're good, you're set.
And it's been really interesting through these conversations that I've been having with like other people and sharing my journey and all of these things. First of all, I've noticed that there's like actually a much larger polyamorous community that I even knew. And we're not dabbling in that, but like just, and the swinger scene in Durham is like massive. And I had no idea. And I was talking to people who are in that scene. And it's just like, the point of all of this is, I think it's just so interesting what happens when you share your story and people are like, oh my, and that's a big piece for me too. And just my business and me as a person is creating that community around things that like people feel shame around, right? Like, some people don't feel safe talking about that because there is still a fuck ton of judgment. There's still a fuck ton of, homophobia and just like deep inherent homophobia that they don't even realize is homophobia, or, when referring to a trans person and being like, well, he used to be a girl. And it's like, no, they're just a girl. If that's their pronouns, they're just a girl now. And like, it's just so deep seated. It just runs so deep.
Well, it's kind of systemic, like when we talk about like racism and white supremacy, right? It's the same thing. And I just even think back to when we had Carling on the show, like how she managed to figure out in her early teens that she was a lesbian and came out and was like, without even a conversation, kind of put back in the closet. And I was reminded of that conversation in the beginning when you were talking about your ADHD and like, I did the things I was supposed to do. Like we do, like there's this, like, it's come up a few times, like more than just these 2 times, I feel like, about like these things that we're like supposed to do. And
I believe Carling, and if anybody wants to go back, you can listen to that episode. It's Carling's story of coming out, or Carling's coming out story. But she, I think, referred to it as the heteronormative agenda.
Very much.
Like, yes, it's the agenda, right?
Exactly what it is.
Yeah.
And that belief that, like, in order to have value, you have to like have a house, buy a house, have a job, be an, upstanding member of society, kids, whatever the fuck that means. And it's just like, what I really appreciate about Gen Z, at least to my understanding through TikTok, is they're very much like, fuck all of that. Fuck it all. All of that. I don't buy into any of it. I don't subscribe to your gender norms. I don't subscribe to your, monogamous lifestyle. I don't subscribe to the hustle culture. Like I've seen a lot of TikToks of like, Gen Z starting a new job and they're like, I start at 8 and I end at 5. Do not contact me outside of those hours. And I'm like, oh my God, if I cannot imagine.
Oh my God, that was
setting that boundary when I worked in that world. Are you kidding? You went to work, you left work, you maybe had dinner and then you worked again. And then you started and you completed that circle. I was on vacation and I still had my fucking phone with me and I was still answering emails. I ran the social media and I was the only person who understood how it even worked. So I had to respond to things on it. Like, it's just such a different, and I'm like, fuck yeah, man, set those boundaries. Like, and don't subscribe to anything. Figure it out for yourself. You decide what you want to do. You decide how you want to be. But like, even for us as kids, the question we always were asked, we're like, what's your job going to be? What are you going to be when you grow up? And instead of being like a nice person, it was like, I'm going to be a lawyer or a doctor or make lots of money. And not that there's anything wrong with making lots of money. I would love to, but
Or being a doctor or a lawyer.
Yes, those are beautiful things, but like you can also be something instead of that or outside of that. Like that doesn't have to be, you don't have to just be a mom. You can be a mom who also, you know, dabbles in the, you know, S&M world. Like, I don't know, whatever you want to do.
Whatever you want to be.
It's just like, it's just so interesting how that was never, I don't think ever really communicated to us as kids and through our adolescence.
But seriously, like I feel like it all really is like intertwined, right? This idea of doing what you're supposed to do.
Mm-hmm.
And even with what you talking about masking, like you're supposed to fit in. And so you have to, so especially it's, I think even more so in those situations feels like you're doing what you're supposed to be doing. Like Carling was doing what she was supposed to be doing when she was, you know, adhering to the heteronormative agenda of getting married and having a dog and trying to have babies with her ex-con husband.
Love it.
But like, it kind of makes me mad. Like there shouldn't be anything you're supposed to do other than like be kind and
be happy
and contribute something to society
and be happy. Like, I think that's like one of the biggest things that I'm focusing on right now is like being happy for me and like finding my own happiness as it relates to my family and all of that. But like I've always, and this is very much for me, a part of my ADHD is that external validation piece and really like stepping away from that and being like, what makes me happy? Like, what do I enjoy? What lights me up? And I couldn't tell you, honestly, guys, I couldn't tell you. And it changes all the time because of ADHD, but like, it's asking myself that question, like, what does make me happy? Like that really stopped me in my tracks a couple of years ago. And who am I? Like, who am I outside of all these masks that I wear? Like, you know, I'm job Lisa, I'm coach Lisa, I'm mom Lisa, I'm wife Lisa, but like stripping all of those away, and it changes day to day, right? Obviously. And it changes, you know, circumstance to circumstance. But one of the coaches that I was working with was like, just like whatever you want to do in that day, just do it. You don't have to have rules. You don't have to, you know, one day you can be your quirky, crazy self and the next day you can be depressed as fuck. And that's okay. Like,
but there's so many rules that we think we have to kind of abide by. And I think a lot of people, and myself included, we like get lost in all of that.
Massively.
And then I don't know, do we come to a certain age where we're just like, what am I doing?
Yes.
Like,
I think so.
Right? Like what makes me happy? And I've said before, like, I feel like I kind of lost.
Is this what we call a midlife crisis? Like what they called a midlife crisis?
Quarter life?
Maybe. But like, I definitely feel like, you know, I reached a point where I'm just like, well, what the heck do I want? Like,
yes.
Who am I outside of being a mom? How do I want to actually spend my time? Right. And like, this is such a, I don't know, ridiculous example, but like I got rid of a coffee table in my front room because I never use it. But the rule is if you have a couch, you have a coffee table. You got to have the coffee table, right? But like, I'm so much fucking happier without it. And the room actually looks better without it. And like, it took up all this space that I didn't need. And now my dog's like loving life on the carpet and my kids have so much more room to dance. I'm like, why the fuck did I have that coffee table here for so long?
Because that's what you should
do. The rule says you got a couch, you got a coffee table. That's what you do with your house.
Yes. It's
right. You buy the house.
100%. And then you furnish it.
Well, where do you put a drink if you're sitting at it and you have a drink though? Where do you put the drink? Or do you just never have a drink?
Side table.
Oh, you have a side table. You have a side table. Okay. So there's still
we have a ledge on the back.
If I have a coffee table, I don't have a side table.
Yes, totally.
Maybe.
You know what I mean?
And then and
that's just, you know, curiosity. Like I'm not saying you need I don't think you need it. I'm just asking.
I'm sitting here.
I've got like 3 glasses around me.
I'm sitting here on my laptop and I've got my laptop on the piano bench, which will just go back to the piano when I'm done.
Perfect.
I mean, it's just a silly example, but there's so many things like that where we just have things because we're just supposed to. Like, or we're doing things because that's just what you're supposed to do.
There's too many rules.
One of my questions right now is says who. my husband or someone will say like, oh, well, we should do this. And I'm like, says who? Like, why? Even just like, someone posted about this the other day with their kids, and they were like, my kids said that they wanted tacos for breakfast. And it was like, yeah, says who? That why not? Like, literally, why not? If it's good enough for dinner, it's good enough for breakfast. It has all of the components, like, right? Like, it's just, there's so
Seems
many.
healthy enough.
Like, listen, it's better than
healthier than cereal.
Say, like, healthier than the Lucky Charms that they were going to be eating anyways. So, like, it's just and it's just like breaking those, kids having meltdowns in the middle of the store. It's like my husband gets really flustered with that. And I do too, don't get me wrong. But then at the same time, I'm like, who cares? Who said, like, or, when we're trying to teach our kids to like control their emotions, I'm like, but says who? Like, why can't we just, if you're at home, obviously at an appropriate time, but like Oliver and I will scream into a pillow beside each other because we need that, like, that tension release. Right? Like, and teaching them. So instead of like, and this is kind of similar to what I'm doing with my ADHD, like, instead of covering it up, how do we healthfully express it? Because it's going to come out somewhere, right? Like, it's like like a pop bottle. If you're going to keep shaking it, it's going to eventually explode. So it's like,
we talk a lot about just like, you can feel angry, you can have your feeling, but you don't get to hurt your brother. You don't get to scream at me about it. You don't get to like do that stuff, but that doesn't mean you can't feel how you're feeling.
And how do we like what a gift to be, like, imagine being taught that, like, how to express your emotions.
I was not
like that. It's just, and that's just like one example, but there's just so many times where like somebody will say something to me and I'm just like, but says who? Like, who are we bumping up against this? And, this is a lot of my work and the work that I do with people as well, is like, is we have these, and this is, such a total sidebar, but like, we have these kind of like, I call them voices in our heads that often dictate what we do. And we have like our inner child voice, we have our like parent voice, and then we have our higher self voice. That's like our adult self. But often it's the inner child and the parent that are running the show. And so what we're doing is like with your coffee table example is like, there was somewhere along the line that was taught to you that that's what you're supposed to do. So just subconsciously you have the coffee table there, and then your higher self is like, but why? I don't like it. It doesn't fit with my lifestyle. It doesn't fit with my vibe, my whatever. And like, that's that higher voice that's coming in and being like, but why? And so what's been really interesting for me in a lot of the work that I've been doing with myself, one of my coaches taught me this about the voices, is like, who's running the show? Like, who is it right now that's actually saying these things? And then you have like your inner critic as well, which is kind of like a byproduct of all of these other places. But like, if I'm having a critical moment about my body, I'm like, but who is saying this to me right now? Because it's not actually what I'm very much in love with all bodies. All bodies are good bodies. I actually love my body. And that's been a transformation in itself too. But like, when I don't feel good about it, I'm like, but what's that voice? Like, who's actually in control right now? And it's usually, my parents or society or whoever. I whisper like they can't hear me if they're, my parents, like, no, if they're listening, they're listening. So it's just that really interesting, like, okay, so when I was a kid, this is the way that we were told to do things, but I'm challenging that narrative now. And now my higher self is coming through and being like, fuck that, we're not doing that. And I mean, it's easier said than done. Trust me, it's a process, but it's been really interesting to really like give those voices in my head, to give them a label and help them and understand what they are. Because don't trust most of your thoughts, because they're mostly based in past stories. And that's been, I could do a whole other podcast on that, so I won't go any further. But hi, this is what happens when you talk to an ADHD individual. How many topics have we covered tonight? Every one of them? Like, we talked about racism, we talked about homophobia, we talked about ADHD, we talked about being queer. Like, we're
but it's good. You've got but it's all stuff that's going on with you. And it sounds like from the connections that you're making and the people you're talking to, that you're not the only one.
Totally.
So
totally.
We appreciate your vulnerability. Not that it was a surprise, but it's just nice. We like to have these kinds of vulnerable conversations.
And I love that you guys have the space to do it. It's so important. Like, it's so important that stories are heard and that people, like, I think where so much challenge or so many problems in the world comes from misinformation, people not understanding, people not taking the time to understand, and also like shame. like, I think so much is
shame.
rooted in shame, right?
Mm-hmm.
And like when we release that shame, it's a game changer. And again, way easier said than done. Like, it's so ingrained in every part of living. Like, having debt is shame. Like whatever it is, motherhood is full of shame, right?
Yeah.
So it's like, if we're able to release that and have these conversations and like feel less alone and connection, like it's beautiful. I think it's so beautiful that you guys have this and are doing this and sharing people's stories, because that's what we need. Like, that's what we need right now. So thanks for allowing me to, I love to talk about
thanks
myself.
For being on.
I think most people do, though.
Totally.
I think most people, when it comes to like certain things in life, like to like have the space to.
Totally.
We'll have you back and we'll talk about like another 6 topics.
Great. I am anything.
Yes.
I will like, and then I'll focus on it, and then I'll know everything.
Amazing. We will have how you can contact Lisa or get in touch with her, follow her on TikTok and Instagram and all the things, work with her, all of it.
Yes.
In the show notes.
Perfect.
So definitely check her out. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thanks for listening to Now What? If you've enjoyed this episode, leave us a review. Your ratings and reviews help more people like you find our podcast.
Don't forget to subscribe and share this episode with someone you think would love it. Until next time, remember, your hard times are the chance to write another chapter.